Do you want to go first?
Surprise. Well, simultaneously surprised and not, because I was away during the first 3 days of the test match, obviously watching the highlights and so forth. So you think after a team gets bowled out for 78 and then halfway through day one, England piling on the runs rather, and you think, oh, well, hang on, how long is this going to last? And then day three, India did very well in very testing conditions to, in a sense, make it last as long as they did. And then they go into day four thinking, hang on a second, this is a really good test match potentially all of a sudden. India in a very good position. But that new ball talked. Anderson and particularly Ollie Robinson were bang on it. Every good ball or every somewhat average shot took the edge. Every edge went to hand. Possibly what should have happened the day before happened on day four. I think people will be reading a lot into the collapse, but you give up that kind of deficit early on, or you bowl for 78 and then your bowlers don't fire immediately. Really, once you let a team get over 200, 250 from that point, you're anything you do from there is a bonus. So simultaneously surprised and not.
They were 2 wickets down, weren't they, at the start of the fourth day, were India. All England fans who know only too well England's ability to grasp defeat from the jaws of victory could just see that scoreboard piling on runs. To be honest, it was a bit of a surprise that we should have more confidence in England, I suppose. But it was a surprise that India fell over quite so quickly. Robinson, as Nakul said, bowled quite magnificently. Anderson popped up with a wicket when he needed to, and it all happened much quicker than we thought, which leaves us tantalisingly, teasingly, and magnificently poised for the Oval and for Old Trafford.
I mean, if you were to look at the social media back home, you wouldn't believe that this is still 1-1, everything to play for, and this is only England's first victory this summer after 4 test matches. So, Nakul, your thoughts on how the reaction has been in India, because you follow Twitter and everything very closely. Some of it is just bonkers, I think, but your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there very rarely seems to be shades of grey in India's approach. That's the thing.
I don't think England's social media is too far removed from that. There's a certain core of, I think there are a certain number of cricket fans, whichever nation you follow, who just like to complain and almost are happier when things are going wrong, because it gives them the chance to be, I told you so, and everything's terrible, and sack everybody, sack the batting coach, sack all of the players. But that's been happening for England for a while. I mean, it's incredible. England were actually really good through 2020 and then played magnificently in that first test in Chennai. One test match and suddenly everything started falling apart. It was quite alarming, really. But with India, yeah, we put out a tweet on Guerilla Cricket, just a very quite banal thing, really, just saying, a little bit of a highlights or something from the previous test and saying a little clip of Virat Kohli in the press conference and then saying, what would your changes be? And we've had drop Rishabh Pant, drop Cheteshwar Pujara, drop Ajinkya Rahane, let KL Rahul move into the middle order and keep, despite the fact he's never kept in a test match and has only just come back into the team after 2 years away. Drop any number of the bowlers you want. Have Jadeja batting above Pant. Someone said during the test match, bat Jadeja at 3, which is I don't think even he, with his faith in himself, would think that was the case. Realistically, I think actually we'll come on to the team selections. England are probably going to end up making more changes than India are going into this fourth test match.
One of those would be enforced. Definitely.
Joss Butler's on paternity leave for the birth of his second child. India, not that much has changed. India played badly and got caught in a perfect storm on that first morning in quite friendly conditions, let's be honest. I mean, if India had scored 278 rather than 78, I think this would have been a very competitive test match, because the pitch wasn't. This is the most batting friendly pitch we've seen all series. The Oval, I think, might even beat that, because the Oval has been flat and quite slow for a while. India would not expect, I think, this is not a typical English pitch in that sense that we'll be seeing at the Oval. So England and India will have to work harder for their wickets than they have done maybe at some point in this series. So that there's that one change, and India really, Ashwin looks very likely to play, and there's a leak that's been sent out to the Indian equivalent of the Associated Press, the Press Trust of India, saying that Ashwin's going to play. Who knows how much to ever read into those things, but we know that Ashwin's been close to playing at certain points in this series. But really, 1-1, 2 tests to go. India have played very well through most of this series. I don't think that the Indian team management and captain are are thinking of this as panic stations in any sense, and I'm almost disappointed I have to say that, to be honest. But just to assuage people, teams can play badly sometimes, even very good teams, and there was going to be James Anderson was going to happen at some point during this series. He happened all at once.
With or without, I wasn't aware there'd been a sort of a leak, but I mean, if you look at the Oval and the history of the Oval, not necessarily always favour a spinner, but it tends to be flatter, known as a batsman's track. It can get warmer and dustier, even probably in September towards the 4th and 5th day. And you'd think Ashwin, if he was going to play anywhere, not to mention the fact, hasn't he already taken a 7-for there in his last first-class innings? So, when he's supposed to be taking a bit of time off, and being Ashwin, he decided that he'd want to go and play for Surrey, who, of course, being Surrey, immediately said, "How much do you want? We'll double it. Come and play." He's got recent form at the Oval. I tell you who I would be really, really disappointed from an India perspective if he didn't play, and that's Pujara. Now, I think the key wicket that really started the rot was Pujara. Yes, it was an odd one. He left one that he shouldn't, and it was a strange shot selection. But that 91, what was his highest before that? And 45 was it? He'd made 49 maybe, I can't remember. But it was the first time he'd really gone. If he'd have stayed in a bit longer, I think we might have seen a closer game. And I just have a feeling the Oval's much more likely to be the kind of ground that I genuinely think he will come good. Pujara, and he's a thorny old nut to remove.
And it's a bit of a cliche, but it's not just the runs, it's the manner. He looked so assured on day 3. His feet were moving well. He was driving well. He was getting that late cut going that he plays so well. He looked very comfortable against Moeen Ali, coming down the track and then cutting late. And that was his fastest ever half century outside of Asia, of 91 balls, and he looked pretty much in control and that's testament to how well he played against. There was that particular spell in the afternoon where Robinson was getting the ball to jag off the seam in both directions. He came through that challenging period, but he was very solid without being as cautious and as strokeless as he has been at times in this series. I think before this Test match, in this 100-less run that he's been on, he's been scoring at over 10 runs per 100 balls lower than his career average, than his career mean, rather. So he's been a very exaggerated version of himself, as players tend to do when they're slightly out of form. But he looked very much in command and like the player who's got 18 Test match hundreds and until very recently averaged 50. I don't think there is actually a serious question about dropping Pujara. I don't actually agree with the pundits who say that this was a career-saving innings from him. It made things a little bit easier, and it stops people talking about him for a while. But I don't think there was a serious question of dropping Pujara. Certainly not once he started looking good. And in this innings, I think Rahane has been talked about as well as someone who hasn't scored many runs since that Boxing Day hundreds, but he performed a very, very important role in the second innings at Lords. I think in both innings, the first innings really he wasn't in there long enough for anyone to work out whether he was looking good or not, but he looked pretty comfortable before he got out in the second innings. He was driving nicely, his feet were moving well, he didn't look as fidgety. I don't think the batting is going to be changed at all, and nor should it be. Virat Kohli said pretty categorically, as much as you can ever tell from post-game, that the 6 batters plus punt the 5 batters plus punt plus 5 bowlers was going to be the way he wanted to go. And I think that makes sense at the Oval, to be honest, because it is a flat pitch. It is one of those pitches that can get slower and lower and easier to bat on as it goes on. And unless it takes turn, it can be a very difficult place to get 20 wickets, and you need those extra bowlers. And particularly if Jadeja is available, we went to hospital yesterday. We don't know exactly what the outcome of that was, but he went on for a scan on his knee. Described as precautionary. I would expect the only change for India to be Ashwin in for whichever seamer looks most knackered, really, and which on the basis of that third test is Ishant Sharma.
You'd think, wouldn't you? He was surprisingly...
It's his worst test for 7 years in terms of the way he bowled. Not just the figures, but he was struggling to find his run up. He was bowling both sides of the wicket. Genuinely troubling for a guy who's been brilliant for the last 5 or 6 years.
But your first question, before we went off on a sort of a verbal walkabout was overreaction or not on social media. If I'm Indian and if I'm looking at India, I'm going, a winning draw at Trent Bridge. Did we win all the big moments? Yes, we did. A win, obviously, at Lords. Did we win the big moments? Yes, we did. Not only did we win the big moments, we got right inside England's head. And they threw away the big moments because of that. We had we lost the big moments at Headingley. That doesn't equal a complete series turnaround. Momentum, yes, you can argue that to a certain extent, but it doesn't seem to me a cause for overreaction.
No,
I think England can still count themselves fortunate that it's level when you look back to Trent Bridge.
Yeah, although that said, England would have gone into the last day at Lords expecting to be the side with the winning position. So you never quite know, but it's certainly true that in India we're in a very good position going to that last rained out day at Trent Bridge. I mean, were you really expecting England to not play very well at some point in this series? Were you really expecting not to lose a Test match at some point in this series? No. I understand fans get emotional and get angry, and God knows that I've seen it enough from England fans on Twitter and some people on this show. But that happens. That happens, and that kind of noise is just part of it. And you've got to stick to your guns a little bit. And I still think that this India team is a very, very good team, and it's probably better than this England team.
Yeah. And what about Jarbo 69 being banned?
Oh God.
I
was quite tired of him the first time he turned up, particularly when I then found out he's a social media self-described comedian doing it to boost his social media stuff. I'm surprised he was let back in, to be honest, or let back into another ground. And it is not to take it too seriously, but Headingley ban him immediately. They've had the Azim Rafiq report for 2 weeks, and it's still not out yet. And it was commissioned over a year ago. It's interesting what clubs choose to act quickly on sometimes and what they don't.
Good point.
Be interesting to see whether Surrey's banned him or not. And just to the final point upon the overreaction, everyone's going back to 2014, similar trend, drawn test, win at Lords, and then it capitulated. And then the numbers thrown like 1986 is the only time India has won more than one test. So people are like worried. I think this match has had more reaction than even the World Test Championship final. That's what